it's Richard Pears from FinextraTV, and I'm delighted today to be joined by Dr. Vian Sharif. She's joining us for Finextra's Predict 2023 series, giving us trends for what's happening into the new year. Now, Dr. Sharif is a head of sustainability at FNZ, a leading platform for wealth management. She's also founder of Nature Alpha and a data analyst, data catalyst member for TNFD. So welcome, good to see you today.
Thank you so much for having me, Richard. Thank you.
My pleasure. So we're here today to talk about predictions for 2023. Context, though, is we're just coming off the back of COP15, the biodiversity COP in Montreal. Before you tell us about your predictions for the future, tell us a little bit about what was the ambition and goals for COP15.
Sure. And so the COP15 was centered around biodiversity targets for the world. So in 2020, this was when the COP15 was meant to happen. This was going to be a renegotiation of what they call the Global Biodiversity Framework, a set of targets that the whole world would adhere to with regard to our natural capital and global biodiversity. Sadly, we haven't managed as a planet to achieve any of the goals that were previously set. So this is a really interesting moment, partly because over the last 2 years, there has been such an acceleration in the area of finance and business and data to power decision-making around the area of nature and biodiversity. So it was a really fascinating moment where policymakers and business and NGOs, really the whole global community came together to negotiate a new global biodiversity framework, which will set the stage for what happens in the next coming years.
So if you take that context, thanks for beautifully setting that out for us, what is actually likely to be your predictions for taking the targets that were agreed and what that means to the financial services industry and the technical and data providers that supply them?
Yeah, Richard, thank you for asking that question, because this was all about predicting the trends that are coming. Usually biodiversity COP is slightly smaller than a climate COP, but actually what was so interesting was that what came out of this meeting is absolutely a trend predictor, certainly for the next 12, 24, 36 months. And I would say there are 3 areas here that come out in terms of what the future might look like. The first is that everyone there was searching for a net zero for nature, an apex target that we could convene around. What direction are we going in? You know, how do we align all stakeholders in society to get there? And what came out was the idea of 30 by 30. So the language really highlights an apex target of 30% of the Earth's land and sea protected by 2030. What does this mean for data and decision making? It means that we need to understand which are these areas, which are the priority areas. We need to understand the proximity data that we have around directly owned operations and supply chains, drawing on those areas and how this might be affected. And that's something we've been working very, very hard on through our partnerships with IBAT and other NGOs, which will come out in the future. The second is disclosure. Really, the narrative and the wording that ended up being agreed is nigh on a mandatory language around disclosures. How are we operating in relation to biodiversity and nature? And that's something very, very new. The final thing that I wanted to highlight, the final theme, was really the presence and the engagement of the business and finance sector at this COP, which was unprecedented. And the reason for that is this is the predictor of a trend. Business and finance have looked at the regulation. They understand that there are mandatory disclosures, voluntary right now, but moving towards mandatory disclosures that are taking place, which the regulators are starting to put in place. And they want to be able to engage with this and understand how it affects them. So expect to see nature and biodiversity absolutely rising up the agenda for lots of different reasons in the business and finance sector. What does it mean? From the data perspective, it means that we need to harness the incredible work that's going into geospatial analysis, new sources of data, which is just extraordinary to see the wealth of providers in this space. But crucially, we need to make that data useful and usable and integratable into the workflows of investment managers, of business decision makers, and make it easy to consume and understand. That's a very exciting place to be. It's the marriage of geospatial and traditional data, which I think is going to create a next revolution, not only because of the technology that's needed to do this, but also how we actually deliver and process that data in a scalable way. And it's happening now.
Wow, it's extraordinary, isn't it? I think as firms are only just starting to sort of get a grip with the carbon accounting, you know, they're starting to see that this the biodiversity data is coming through, which has its own challenges. But we've spoken about geospatial, eDNA, traditional data, and making that available for risk managers and the like. You see that all of the same, if you like, muscles that have been built up for carbon, those muscles have got to be extended and grown for biodiversity, do you, in 2023?
100%. And I think the narrative coming out of COP15 was very much that climate was a forerunner, and nature comes in very nicely behind that. To look at something like the Task Force for Nature-Related Financial Disclosures, there's an emphasis on defining what these metrics are and how you combine those into a framework that's really already been set by the climate agenda. And so integrating is a natural step on that path. And I would, as a practical step, say to anyone who's looking to understand this a little better, the opening section of the first version of the TNFD, the Task Force for Nature-Related Financial Disclosures, is one of the best expositions on what natural capital is, why it's important, and how we might start to measure it. So really good piece of reading if you want to get your head around this topic.
Fantastic. Well, look, thanks so much for coming straight back off that plane, it feels like, and actually telling us what happened there, and your sort of energy that you're bringing from this is tremendous. So we look forward to hearing more from you in 2023. Thanks so much, Dr. Vian Sharif.
Thank you so much, Richard. Thank you.